Thank you so much for coming. We'll just get this going. Usually we always have a 30-minute to 40-minute buffer because everybody's busy. Even though we say 6 o'clock, it is what it is. Just so you know, I record the beginning portion of this. It's just my portion of it. The reason I record it is because I put it up on social media and I get to have people that come out because of it. But also for really heavily impacted communities of not just gangs, but gang violence, what happens is the voices that are heard here don't get out to the right people. And the right people being decision makers as well as different levels of government. So what this does for us is it allows us to get these voices out to a larger audience on social media where, for example, there might be 40 people here, but some of the videos we put up will get 15,000 views. And if you actually look to see who's viewing it, it's like strategic advisors to different levels of government. And that way we can liaise with them and say, hey, we need more resources dropped into different areas. So that's what I do. To give you an itinerary of today, we'll spend maybe half an hour kind of going through the framework of kind of why we're here, what gang prevention actually is, the vision that we have as the Toronto Police going forward. And then what we do is we take off the mic, we turn off the camera, and we just have an open, honest discussion. All right, and in that open, honest discussion, we only have kind of 3 things that we like to keep as a theme, all right? The first one being is we try to stay solutions focused. So rather than talk about all the problems or whose fault it is, we can talk about that forever, but it doesn't put us in a better position going forward. The second one is we use I statements, all right? And what I statements are, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is has anybody been to marriage counseling before? Does anybody need to go to marriage counseling? Yeah. 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 So this is what an I statement is, all right? And it's kind of weird to do sometimes, but this is exactly what it is. Let's say my wife comes home from work and I'm home and she comes in and I didn't take out the garbage and I didn't change the light bulb or whatever else I was supposed to do, I didn't do, and she comes home and she says, you know, honey, I'm really upset. You didn't do all these things. I wish you did it because it made me mad. Right away, what happens, right? We do this. But if she comes home and she says instead, you know what, when I see that the garbage isn't taken out, when I see the light bulbs don't work, it makes my day more frustrating. Now I'm going to listen and we're going to work together on it. So we try to use I statements not to divide the room. We really want to work together, and that's kind of the theme for it. And the last part of it is we just ask that everybody be open and respectful of each other's opinions. All right, really, when it comes down to this type of stuff, there's so many stereotypes, there's so many ideas, there's so many experiences that people have when it comes down to gangs, that unless we get the stereotypes or our experiences out there, we're never going to get to what the root cause issues are or what the truth may be. So I ask that everybody be respectful of everybody's opinion. Any other questions with that? No, we're good. We're good. Again, there's food in the back. So I'll go through this again. My name is Ron Chinzer. I'm part of this bad boy over here. I have some people helping us in the back. We have some officers from your division, which some of you know. What I can tell you is this is our 11th town hall that we've done, and we've gone from east to west to downtown. The numbers of people coming up have changed dramatically. Sometimes we'll have 20 people, sometimes we'll have 60 to 70 people. And what we found is each neighborhood we go into, while the problems all kind of look the same, they're actually very different. Each neighborhood is very different. And the benefit of knowing that going forward is for us as the Toronto Police, for the City of Toronto, for every other partner group that we have incorporated into this, what traditionally would happen is they would just kind of blanket the entire city, right? They'd say, okay, we're going to do this program to deal with this issue. What we're learning by having these conversations is that each neighborhood is completely different than the other. So they're the same, but they're very different. And because they're different, we need to find out what's happening in each of the neighborhoods to be able to appropriately address the needs of the community. One of our town halls, this is not a gang member. She didn't come in as a gang member, but one of our town halls that we had in the east end of the city, I was there waiting to set up. We got there early, we had a coffee, and this lady comes in a wheelchair. And as she comes in, she sees me, and she says, hey, Ron, I actually came to talk to you. I said, yeah, what's up? And she says, listen, I need help. Okay, what do you need help with? And what she ends up telling me is that when she was 11 or 12, her parents passed away. When she was 15, she was assaulted and had a baby. That 15-year-old daughter, at the age of 15, again, had another baby. And then now at the age of 75, she's a great-grandmother because her granddaughter also had a baby at the age of 15. And for this mother who's 75, she's ill, grandmother, great-grandmother, she says, my time is coming to an end, and the only way for me to go peacefully is for me to pass on a message to my great-granddaughter that life doesn't have to be this way. She says, I've watched 4 generations now of my family go down the exact same path. And that path was her daughter initially got gang involved, and that took them down the path of victimization continuing forward. And for us, that's a story that we're seeing in every neighborhood, but in a different light. But it's now become a generational issue where we have kids that are gang members, that come from gang members, that come from gang members. And until we can address the deep root cause issues, there's not going to be a solution in sight in terms of providing an alternative or being able to understand where do we go from here. 3 years ago, myself and Detective Jason Condo in the back, one of our higher ups in the police organization, all right, he's a deputy chief, and for those of you who kind of get lost in the police lingo, it happens to all of us. Some of the ranks even I'm confused with when I hear about it. But I want you to imagine this. Let's pick any corporation. Well, who works for big business or anything like that? Anybody? Who? Okay, so we're going to use TD Canada Trust, right? It's a bank. Everybody knows it. So imagine TD Canada Trust has a CEO or president, and that CEO or president is equivalent to our chief of police. Right? So they're like the number one person. All right, underneath that CEO are 4 vice presidents, and each one of those 4 vice presidents are in charge of something different. Maybe sales, marketing, branding, who knows, whatever else it is, right? Well, we have the same thing in Toronto Police, except our vice presidents are called deputy chiefs. And one of the deputy chiefs is in charge of us in Specialized Operations Command, which sounds really cool. And all it really means is all kind of the secret stuff of police, the guns and gangs or drug squad or the guys who do bank robberies, all those type of people fall under this vice president. And he'd come down 3 years ago to Guns and Gangs, and he found Jason, and he said, Jason, we need to extend our gang efforts a little bit beyond what we're doing. And every year for 15 years, we run 2 major projects, sometimes 3, sometimes 4, where you'll see it in the newspaper. And what happens is police from Toronto, as well as all the other police agencies, will do search warrants, and we'll take search warrant rams, and we'll hit these doors, and we get 150 bad people. All right, and we get guns, we get drugs, we get money, and then we leave. And what we've seen over the last 15 years is while we're doing an effective job at doing what we do, we're not really dealing with the root cause issues, the problems. In fact, you'd think with those type of initiatives and efforts that those numbers would dwindle. In fact, they're growing, which highlights a bigger problem for us. So our role is definitely to arrest people who make bad decisions and have guns and hurt people, but we're missing a necessary step, and that necessary step was at the time, how do we get a gang member out of a gang? So the goal for us was to develop some sort of program where we can get existing gang members and manage to encourage them to leave that lifestyle. And we called it a gang exit strategy at the very beginning. And when we did that, we had a conversation. We said, okay, well, how do we do this? Sounds great, right? And we thought about it. So I'll ask you here in this room, if you were tasked to figure out how to get a gang member out of a gang, what would you say you do? Difficult? Hard? Sounds great, right? Everybody says this all the time. We got to give gang members different alternatives. They need to be able to have a different lifestyle option. But then when we actually got to the nitty gritty and we asked around, we said, okay, well, what do we do? How do we do it? Nobody had an answer for us. So we decided to go to the evidence-based strategy. So we found all these academic publications from all over the world. We touched base with many police agencies, not only in Canada, not only in the United States, but all over the world, specifically between North America and Europe, to say, what are you doing? Does anybody have a successful strategy to get a gang member out of a gang? And what we found is nobody has a strategy to do it. But what we did learn in the process was there are many ways to prevent kids from the age of 0 all the way up to 21 to not get in a gang in the first place. So we really wanted to focus on something greater than that called a prevention strategy. But we have some other pillars to it. So initially with us, when they said, how do you get a gang member out of a gang? There's 2 things we had to look at, and we had to be fair about it. And the whole idea is you want to be objective. Objective being, I don't want my experiences or Jason's experiences or Marlon or any of the officers in the back, their experiences to be a little bit jaded in who we were looking at. Right? So we had 2 things we had to look at, especially when we had this target or this idea of the mission is to get a gang member out of a gang. One is, where do we go? And the second one is, who are we looking at? All right, so I'll ask you where. All right, so if I ask you here in the city of Toronto, if we have to get a gang member out of a gang, where do we go? What would you say? It depends on which gang we're talking about. Very true. All right, but here, I'll give you a scenario here. Imagine this, I go into my pocket, I pull it out, and then what's in my pocket is a magic pill. And this magic pill, if we give it to a kid who's been involved in a gang, or an adult, it doesn't matter, it's going to change their life. Not only is it going to change their life, but it's going to change everybody else's life in that neighborhood. All right, this kid is they're going to be the most violent gang member. We give them this pill, all of a sudden everything changes. They become academic success, they become a multimillionaire, they decide to come back into the community, develop new economic opportunities, new jobs. There's going to be a statue of this kid. But I need to know, what area do I go to in the city of Toronto? So I'll ask you here. I have to go to an area. Where do I go? This is the uncomfortable part, right? Nobody wants to say, where do I go? And that's an issue for us.
Why does it matter where you go? Gang is a gang.
Exactly. But I need a hard intersection to go to, right? We're gonna work as a team right now. We are going to change. Jungle? Everybody, okay. Yeah, call it what it is, right? I love that. So jungle, Lower West jungle. Everybody's okay with jungle? Is that a good place? We now have 45 minutes, right? We got to get this pill in somebody's mouth. So the second part that became, well, who are we looking for once we go to the jungle? So now I got this pill. I have to go into the jungle. Now I have to find somebody. So what does this person look like? Let's start with this. Is it a boy or a girl? Both, but we have 30 minutes now. Okay, a boy. All right, perfect. And give me so we have a boy, of course, and give me a rough age of this boy.
18 to 30.
18 to 30? A wide range between a boy and a man, but we got it, 18 to 30, all right? And, sorry, 15? Yeah. Okay, so which one are we going to go with as a room, 18 to 30, or are we going to go 15? 15? 15, perfect. 15-year-old boy in the jungle. And what type of clothing does this kid wear? Now we have 20 minutes. Hoodie? Pants hanging low. All right. Yes, sir.
So while that might be a person to go after, wouldn't it be more effective to go find one that has leadership qualities?
Yeah, but we're looking at something deeper than a physical characteristic. But I have to physically find this person first.
So, but you could do that. So if do you only have 30 minutes to find them, or do you have time to go find, go look at the community where the gang members are present? Then you can monitor the activity of the individuals that you believe are part of a gang and look for the one that has the leadership qualities. Because the one that has the leadership qualities is the one that is bringing those other people who are looking for community, who are looking for a voice, who are being brought through that process as part of that person's charismatic being. If you change that person, you are going to have a greater effect on the people that they're leading.
Potentially. But we don't have time.
So that's why I asked, how much time do you have?
We got 10 minutes now.
And not only that, back to your point, the 15-year-old doesn't know who the leader is. He's brought in by somebody else. Usually it takes you to move up the ladder before you know who the head of the gang is. And you just don't know. You don't know who your orders are coming from. One guy might tell you do this, but it's coming from the top person, right? So you don't know who the top person is. The 15-year-old who's just new to the game doesn't know who the top guy is. So that's the thing.
Okay, but we're down to 5 minutes. I'm in the jungle.
But you might not always know the leader, but we're talking about preventive measures. So we don't want to talk about the guy who's already a gang member. We want to prevent this youth from getting into a gang.
We're going to change this kid's life, right, with a pill. 5 minutes left. So listen, guys, we know it's a boy. We know he's 15. We know he's got a hoodie on. We know he's got light. And here, I'll ask you this. What color is this kid? Black? Could be, hey, listen, could be, but listen, this pill is going to change. This pill is going to change his life. So we gotta commit here collectively as a room. What color is his skin? You know what happens traditionally when I ask that question in a room? Oh, everybody goes quiet. All right, nobody wants to say what everybody is thinking. All right, and that's the point of that is, and the reason why we do this exercise is that's not the case. All right, if I were to go to jungle, how many kids I'm going to find that look like that are not gang members? A lot more than guys who are gang members, and that's the point. We wanted to stay away from what we believed everybody thought was a traditional gang member, because that's not the case. The case is physical characteristics have limited to do with what a gang member does. They might have some representation to them, but that's not the be-all, end-all. That's not the blanket truth. We need to be very open in what we wanted to do. So we have to figure out an objective way to do this outside of this. And then just for clarity, and there's a bigger issue here, and it's nobody's fault. It's nothing like that. This is not to put blame, but now this being our 11th one, going from west to east to downtown, from north to south, in every single one of these town halls, when we've asked this question, it's been the exact same description. Every single one of them. All right, so male, black, 15 years old. Every single one of them. All right. Listen, It's good we know this. It's good we're getting it addressed and we're getting it out in the open, all right? So that's the point of this, is we need to get this garbage out of the way to start focusing on where the solutions lie by telling the actual truth. All right, so here's the truth. How we decided this and kind of how we ended up in Parkdale, I'll tell you this. The city of Toronto, a couple of years ago, they divvied up the neighborhood. They divvied up the entire city into 140 different neighborhoods. Is everybody familiar with that?
Yeah.
Right, so, and how it got divvied up was the city said we're going to do something called an equitable score. And that equitable score was based on a few things. Some of it being, what is the average income of a family in there? What does the family look like in terms of a family structure? What does the community feel like their voice is in the development of their own neighborhood? What is the access to economic opportunities? And what is the overall mental, physical, and emotional health of a community? And unfortunately, they deemed 31 of these neighborhoods to be low equitable neighborhoods or neighborhood improvement areas, and Parkdale, South Parkdale, is one of those areas. Everything you see up there that's a darker shade, the kind of yellowish orange and the actual orange, are the 31 neighborhoods that we're hosting these town halls in. And it's not just based off of the low equitable score. Once we determined that there were areas that were being improved, and the good news is come 2020, there's a lot of resources as well as money being redistributed into these communities to get them up to an acceptable level like everybody else. But we also did a bit of a secondary thing, and the secondary thing that we did is we wanted to take a look at where are the gangs? Where do they live? Where do they commit their crimes? Where are they doing the majority of the violent acts? And if we were to take that data and we combine it with this neighborhood improvement area data, it's almost the exact same. So now we had a very objective way to look into what neighborhoods do we need to start prioritizing before we start expanding out to other areas that might not be as impacted by gangs as some of the areas like the one we're in today. And I'll ask you here, is your neighborhood impacted by gangs? Yes, sir.
Keep referring to gangs with it seems like the implicit idea is that you're referring to either the violent ideological gangs or street gangs.
Yes.
And you're not referring to the other four groups.
No, so we're right now, our goal is street gangs.
So it's specific, your focus is specific. And
Specific street
this map
Yes.
focuses specifically on where you've had, what did you call it, a low equitable score plus the presence of street gangs.
Yes. So it's double corroborated, right? You have low equitable scores, and social disorganization is in fact a risk factor for gang involvement on top of actual criminal activity. All right, that's related to street gangs. And the second part became who joins gangs, and we already went through that, right? We said, all right, we need to determine what happens. So here's the thing. We looked a little bit deeper in the research for what exactly happens to somebody for them to join a gang from the age of 0 all the way up. And what we found was there was something called gang risk factors. You have those little laminated cards in front of you? Those are the risk factors. And those risk factors, what the academics in the world, it's evidence-based, it's been referred all over the world. It was published by Public Safety Canada in 2007. And what these risk factors say is, from all these academics, is when it comes down to people who become gang members or kids who join gangs, the more of those risk factors you can check off with a pen beside it, the more likely they are to become a gang member. And that gave us an objective lens. And if you look at it, nothing on there mentions race, ethnicity, sex, or background. It's all social issues. It's all social issues. And they start at the age of 0. And we get asked all the time from our higher ups, at least the first year or two that we were doing this, to say, what does the program look like? And they said, what does the single program look like to deal with gangs? They wanted just a nice little clean package. And here's the reality to it. There's 5 different risk factor categories. All right, you have family, school, peer group, individual, and community. Just 5 of them. Now imagine this, there are 5 different colored balls. Red, black, blue, orange, brown. Who cares, doesn't matter. If I were to give you those 5 different balls and I said to you, I want you to make as many different combinations as you can with these colored balls, how many do you think you could make? 5 balls for any of the mathematicians in the room? Yeah, which is 3,125. So just based off of the 5 different categories, we have 3,125 different potential combinations. Now, if I were to be asked again in the future, say, hey man, what does the program look like? And if I had a program to deal with that many different problems, a single program, I'd be a millionaire. I would quit this job and I would sell it to every police agency in the world. That's I know the solution to gang problems, but we don't. It doesn't work that way. And if we were to take the 36 risk factors individually, you're looking at 150 unvigatillion, which is the number 150 and 69 zeros after it, in terms of different combinations. So we realized very early on, wait a minute, man, there is no single program here. We need to take a bigger stretch. And for 6 months, what we ended up doing is we ended up going out to 2,000 frontline officers, myself and Detective Kondo. And we went there and we educated all the frontline cops on these gang risk factors. And when we asked them at the time, we said, listen, if you, in the course of your duties, when you're out there and you're responding to 911 calls, or you're a community officer and you know people, if you come across kids or families where they might have children that are going down this path of these risk factors, can you kind of identify some of the risk factors and let us know after talking to them to see if they're okay, if they want help? So within a week of doing this, we had an officer reach out to us, and this kid's story is one of many that we deal with on a daily basis that highlights the risk factors, especially the ones that are most prominent, because each of the risk factors kind of show up at different times. So in this kid's story, in the family risk factor categories, those things pop up between the ages of 0 and 6. And the biggest indicator is at the age of 3 is when you see a very disruptive child. Right? I'm not talking about the 3-year-old who touches the walls with his hands all the time, or maybe eats peanut butter with his. I'm talking about the one who steals, who punches, who kicks, who has major temper tantrums. That's one of the biggest indicators that, hey man, there might be something else going on with this kid. In this kid's story that we're dealing with, and we always incorporate the mother if they're under the age of 18. We have to get a family buy-in. It's all voluntary. And we're speaking to this kid and we're speaking to this mother, and what the mother says is at the age of 25, she has 5 kids. Right? Her 5th one is born when she's 25 years old. She's a single mother. She lives in community housing. Now this kid that we're dealing with, he's the middle kid out of all this. And this middle kid, what does he do? He's kind of neglected. He doesn't get the attention that he wants, but he's 3 years old. He doesn't know what's happening. So what does he do? And I want the parents in the room, when you're in there and you're washing your dishes and you can hear the kids, everything's okay, right? What happens when you're washing the dishes and you don't hear the kids? Something's up. So you shut off, you start to go CSI on these guys, right? You start to listen, you kick in the door, and what do you find? You find they're doing something wrong, and what do? Hey, stop doing that. And we go back and we continue doing what we're doing. Now this kid's already starting to connect that this type of behavior gets me something innately that I've been looking for, which is maybe a little bit of attention. Mom's got 5 kids, she's trying her hardest, she's got to figure it out. But this one kid is consistently a problem. And from the age of 0 to 7, our brains operate on what's called the theta wave, which is a state of hypnosis. And in that state of hypnosis, we're not gathering data for what we need to be successful in life, we're gathering data for what we need to survive in life. So this 7-year-old or 3-year-old is now already picked together, and he's wiring things in his brain that said, hey, for me to get kind of attention without knowing this, he's programming his subconscious mind to say, all right, this behavior gets it. Now this same kid at the age of 6 goes to school, and that's where the school risk factor categories come into play, right? And they all carry over, so it's all being layered into it. Family categories at the age of 6, he gets to school, and when he gets to school, it's got school failure. Now I know people say this is Canada, nobody ever fails school, but is there a difference between succeeding and passing? Big time. This kid doesn't succeed, he passes. And when he gets to school, who's the replacement for mom in school for this guy? It's the teachers, right? Any teachers in the room? No, sometimes the teachers, we speak to them and they can speak a little bit more to that, but based on our conversations with the family and the mom, this kid at the age of 6 is like that terrible kid in class, right? And I can remember back when I was in kindergarten, there was 2 terrible boys that wanted nothing to do with these guys. And if you don't know who those kids were, you were probably that kid. But in our case here, we knew who it was, so this was this kid. And what happens is, he gets pulled off to the side, he gets a special teaching assistant, he gets a one-on-one, and he gets separated again from everybody else, so he loses the social skills. Now this kid, after the age of 6, he becomes 9 years old, and it's the city of Toronto. Right? Is it common to see a 9-year-old playing by themselves outside, especially in community housing? Is it uncommon to see that? Not at all. It's Toronto. It's a big city, right? We're a massive city on a global scale. So now this 9-year-old kid, mom says, you got a lot of energy. We got to dump your energy, kid. You're always a pain in my butt. So kid gets dumped outside. So mom says, go dump your energy. And then he goes outside. And now for the first time, you got a kid in the wild who finds what? Other kids in the wild. Now the kids that he meets that's playing in that courtyard of community housing, are they more like him or less like him? More. So now for the first time, this kid goes out there at the age of maybe 8 or 9 years old, and he finds other kids, and for the first time he goes, oh man, these are my people. They're just like me. Their mom said the same thing to them. Now they all get together and they collect, and they move. They move in a pack. Now something happens with this kid between 9 and 15. All right, and at 15 is when you start to see the individual characteristics come into play. And the biggest factor, before I move on to that, in peer group, so the age of 3, you see terrible behavior at home. At the age of 6, you see school failure. At the age of 9, we call it delinquency. All right, so for anybody who's been in school, or a young man over there, at school, young man, if somebody pushes you and takes your treat or granola bar or whatever it is that you have that you like, and you tell the teacher, what do we call that in school?
Snitch.
No, snitch, but what else do they call it in school? Bully. We call it bullying, right? So if a kid pushes another kid and takes something from them and they're 9 years old, we call it bullying. Do you know what it's called if you're over the age of 12? It's called robbery. It's a criminal offense. Delinquency is the word used for kids who commit crimes when they're under the age of 12. But that's when it starts to show itself, right? Is delinquency. Now at the age of 15, the biggest indicator is self-admitted gang membership. And by the time we're dealing with this kid who's a full-fledged gang member and we speak to him, he tells us flat out, yeah, I am a gang member. Not only that, he lifts up his shirt, he's got the gang logo on there, he shows us his social media, he's got nothing but gang tags on there, he's in a few hip-hop videos, he's 100% a gang member. He's self-admitted gang member, and that's the biggest indicator at the age of 15. Now with this kid, we had some history on him. And the history was this, after speaking to the mom, and this is a deeper thing for police officers in the room. At the age of 8, when he's out playing on his own, his mom manages to get him a bicycle. All right? And keep in mind, single mother of 5. What did she have to do to get that bike? But she managed to get this kid a bike, gives it to the kid goes out, but he's in a rough area of the neighborhood. He goes out with the rest of his friends, jumps in front of a store, comes out and his bike is gone. All right? Now the kid comes home and now he's terrified, right? I gotta tell mom my bike is gone. Comes home, he says, Mom, my bike got stolen. Now I want you to imagine, you're that mother of 5. This kid's been a pain in your butt from the get-go. You struggled to get him something, he comes home and he tells you, what? I lost what you got me, what's your response? And forget about trying to sound amazing and sound like you're the best parent in the world. What would you actually say? A tad upset. It's a very polite way of saying I would get the belt, all right? I would have got the belt. My dad would have killed me if I ever came home and I lost something like that, regardless of the fact somebody stole it. So mom loses her mind. This kid feels like this small now, all right? A year later, mom manages to get him a bike and the same thing happens. All right, now here's the crazy part. They call police both times. It's not even crazy. It's just, to me, I look at it in a different light now. They call police 2 times. That bike meant a lot to that kid. It meant a lot to that family. But when they call us, look, it's the city of Toronto. There's like 100 million bicycles here. Okay, the reality is, if your bike gets stolen in the city of Toronto, unless we come across it by accident, the likelihood of you getting it back is slim to none. There's no bicycle prevention task force here, right? It doesn't operate like that. And it's not to say we don't value that loss. What it's saying is, when it comes down to kind of getting that stuff back, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. So already they've had 2 experiences where they reported 2 incidences to police of high value to them, but unfortunately for us, we just don't have the resources or the capability to get that bike back, so there's already a bit of a distrust there. Right? Police can't even find my bike. You know, why would I call them for anything else? They can't even find a bicycle. This is crazy. So then something happens at the age of 10, this kid, there's nothing, and at the age of 11, he goes missing. Mom calls up and says, listen, this kid was supposed to be home by the time the streetlights came on. It's now at 9 p.m., he's not home, he's 11 years old. So we go out there, mom says, yeah, he probably hangs around the corner with his friends. I checked, he's not there now. Police officers go, we find him. And when we find him, we want to know who all his friends are. And the reason we want to know who his friends are, in case he goes missing again, we want to know who we can call. It's probably one of his friends. So we start to collect some information, right? Okay, he went missing, he was found with these guys at this corner. Great. Now what happens is we go back, and at the age of 12, he goes missing again. And this time the responding officers, they decide, they see the report, we're going around the corner, they find him. The same corner he was found before with the same group of people, and they bring him back, but his attitude's starting to change a little bit. And at the age of 13, he goes missing, but this time he doesn't come back for a week. And he comes back on his own at the age of 13, and mom says he's a different kid. And then what we see is at the age of 14 and 15, he starts to do violent criminal offenses. Extortion, robbery, weapons assault, drug trafficking. He's now participated 150% in that criminal gang lifestyle. And unfortunately for us, any influence or motivation we had on this kid, we lost it. Because we're not around the other 23 and a half hours a day. We maybe have a half an hour, maybe an hour interaction with this kid a week for various reasons, but we lose that motivation. He goes back to that same habits and rituals that he has of being a gang member. So we lose this kid. We have no contact with him. So one day we decided to go back and say, let's go talk to the mom and see what's up. And out of those risk factors that we showed you here, we have a sheet that we fill out. And literally it's a sheet that we give to kids, and it lists all of them. We say, hey, can you fill this out? What do you think applies to you? Believe it or not, this kid fills it out. And we kind of knew what it is. So we decided to come back, and we said, on a whim, let's go talk to the mom. And when we did with the mom, we turned out the mom had more risk factors than the kid. All right, which came us to say, whoa, what's going on here? Or maybe the mom needs more support. So we started to really focus on the pillar in the household being the parents, particularly the mother. Now the question became, the mom had all these risk factors. Why didn't she end up as bad as a gang member as this kid? But we had another realization through many conversations with community members and people and professionals in the field. I want you to think of this Anybody here immigrated to this country? You immigrated, right? And where did you immigrate from? Ireland. Yes, sir, in the back. India, yeah. Yeah, we're taking over. Anyways, yes, yourself. Yes, yourself? Grenada. All right, so now I want you to think of this, all right? Your kids compared to you, are they spoiled, yes or no? Do you have children? No, but your kids. Spoiled compared to what you had it?
Of course.
Yeah, and did you have it better than your parents had it?
Yes.
Yeah, amazing, right? So now we're seeing it's kind of, that's the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to get easier. I look at myself some days, one day actually, oh, Jason's not in the room, he took off because he knew I was going to say this to him. One day, I'll leave him out of this, I'll talk about myself. One day I come into work, all right, like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and I get a coffee, and Tim Hortons accidentally put milk instead of cream in my coffee, all right? And I take that first sip, and I'm like, my day is ruined, all right? And then I remind myself very quickly, and I said, man, this ruined my day. And I remember thinking back to my parents when they immigrated here, and hearing their stories, and even being a young kid and seeing the stuff that they had to go through. And I go, no, that was a rough time. And then I look at my kids and I'm like, these kids are spoiled. And I complain about it, but I'm the guy spoiling them. The point is, it's supposed to get easier, right? So even though this kid is a 15-year-old full-fledged gang member committing violent acts, his mom did as best of a job as she can. Does she need help? 100%. Does this kid need help? 150%. But our goal and focus became focusing on the mother now and the family being the rest of that household. There's 4 other siblings in that household. If we can strengthen the pillars at home, we reduce the likelihood that the 4 other members of that family also become gang involved or gang impacted. As well as we have somebody who's around 24 hours a day. So we're really starting to focus on the mother in this particular case to address her risk factors by getting her connected with free social services within the area that she's in, which is kind of our bread and butter. So what we end up doing with some of these gang kids for now is we go through their risk factors, we look at their postal code, and we try to get them connected to not one organization, but as many organizations as we can to help plug all those risk factors with what's called a protective factor. Now here's the crazier part. This kid, at some point in the path that he's going, he's discontinued any conversation with us over the last year. And he's still getting arrested, doesn't even want to talk to us. And at some point, and traditionally speaking, evidence-based, at the age of 18, it's when it becomes a serious community issue, which is what we're seeing now. You're seeing in the newspaper, guns and gangs in the city of Toronto. You're seeing shootings pop up in places that they don't regularly happen. You're seeing federal leaders at the time of the election talking about the gun and gang violence in different cities and what we're going to do about it. It's become a national issue, almost a crisis when it comes down to this stuff. And what happens is the biggest indicator of gang violence at the age of 18 has to do with this. It's when violence comes out into the community. And when this happens, what does the community do? What do we all do? Somebody has to do something about this, right? Somebody's got, and who's that somebody? It's the handsome men and women of the Toronto Police Service. It's the police. So then the police, we feel the pressure, don't get it twisted. We know what's up and we want this pressure. We want to go out and find these people committing violent acts. But here becomes the other question. If we're going to prevent these acts from happening in the first place, we've gone all the way up to 18. How hard is it to deal with when you now have 36 different things you have to deal with potentially to stop this from happening again? It becomes very difficult. If we were to get in between 0 and 6 in that family category, if you just look at it, is that more doable? Are younger children easier to work with? Are they more open and receptive? You can still mold them. They're still looking for influence. But when we get an 18-year-old who's been pitted, us versus them, their entire life, and they've had negative interactions with the police, which, to be honest, most people have negative interactions with police. Has anybody here ever called police because they had extra cake at home? And they said, we should call the guys and girls with guns. Yeah, and say, oh my God, listen, I found ice cream on sale. We should call the local police station, tell them to come here, lights. Nobody does, right? When do the people call police?
To complain or to, report a crime when they have a problem.
When they have a problem. So it's already a negative connotation to it. On top of that, for people who've never had a negative thing happen in their life, when they get pulled over by police, what's the conversation right? Like, hey, listen, anytime I go to a new party, or I have neighbors, or I meet friends who want to bring me out to like some social gathering, I always tell my friends, I'm like, please don't tell anybody I'm a cop. Like, I don't want to talk about it because I always get the 3 or 4 people that come up and tell me some story about the jerk cop who gave them a ticket. All right, that's just how it goes. As if, I don't know what you expect me to say. There's something like that. Like, am I supposed to agree with you at this point? I wasn't even there. I don't even know the guy. but they want to lecture me about this horrible circumstance. And I'll tell you in one case, actually I was at the party last week. I was at a neighbor's party last week. It's hilarious. It's so funny to me. And this guy is complaining to me how he got pulled over by a cop. He's a friend of mine. And he's like, I got pulled over by a cop because I'm a black guy in Toronto. I go, what happened? He goes, listen, man. He goes, I was driving. They pulled me over. They said I was drunk driving. I got arrested last week. He's like, this is BS. And I go, oh, were you drunk? He's like, yeah, I was drunk. But it's not the point, right? The point is it's the interaction. So now we're at the stage where crime is happening. The police, we're trying our best. We're trying to evolve. We're trying to move forward. We're trying to really put a plug into it. But we need to get into the houses when they're between the ages of 0 to 6. And traditionally speaking, it shouldn't even be us. Police officers, for the police officers in the room, does anybody here have a background in child psychology? I don't have the time, man. I can't watch enough YouTube videos to get me up to speed. I just can't do it, but there's other people who can. So our strategy began to grow. And where the strategy grew was we started to incorporate 4 different pillars in our strategy, all right? The first one is education. It's doing stuff like this. It's taking what we learned, and we're going out to these communities that are impacted like yourself to find community champions. That's the big part for this, is to find community leaders. Who can we grow in the inside? And the second part to that is to also hear back from communities. What's happening on your lens? What are you seeing that we don't see? What are the obstacles that you face? And that's a massive education campaign for us to say, let's not only teach what we learn and what we know, but also let's also spend as much time hearing back and relearning what's happening on levels that we don't understand. The other 3 pillars we have are prevention, intervention, and suppression. All right, and I'll go through what those mean and why we have those in there. Again, academically speaking, our 3 things, prevention, intervention, and suppression, they occur at different times. And this is when you're supposed to use them. Evidence-based, where prevention really works is the ages of 0 to 9. That's where it works, all right, 0 to 9. If we've waited until somebody's 18 before we want to look at preventive measures, we've waited too long. The prevention is not the key at that point. It's 0 to 9. We need to prevent these risk factors from growing into something bigger than what they are. And then after prevention, and this is the crazy part for me, it's intervention, all right? And why I say this is crazy, and I know I use that term a lot because it is to me actually when I look at it and I understand it a little bit better, is how many people are talking about gang intervention right now? None. Everybody is talking about gang prevention. And yes, our name of our organization or this team is gang prevention because it's what people can resonate with. If I said gang intervention, unless you're connected to somebody who's in the criminal justice system that is potentially a gang member, what's the buy-in? It's next to none, right? But here's the part, and this is the part that I feel like is so misplaced and that we really put effort into, is there are tens of thousands of potential gang members that are currently involved in Canada in the criminal justice system that they're just stuck, especially if you're over the age of 18. Once you're over the age of 18, if you get out of jail and you're a gang member, there's nothing for you. You're stuck, you're on your own, completely on your own. And that's an issue for us. So we cannot negate the thousands of people that are gang involved that are currently in the criminal justice system and just treat them like they're just going to disappear on their own. There needs to be strong intervention strategies to determine what are the needs that are happening there, what are the risks that are happening there, and how do we go from here. They can't be neglected, but that's where we need to define who's the best person for it. And the last part is at the age of 15 to 18 on, so 15 plus, the number one way to combat gang violence, not gangs, in the world is to let the police do what we do. We need to arrest violent people. That's it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. There's nothing else to it. Violent people that are doing daytime shootings where kids are getting shot, where elderly are getting shot, regardless of what their background is in the moment, they need to be arrested right away. We cannot allow them or tolerate them to feel so brazen enough that at the Raptors Day shooting or the Raptors Day parade, they feel comfortable where there's almost 2+ million people out there to pull a gun out and pull a trigger without any second thought of it. That cannot be tolerated at any level by anybody. There just needs to be a community level to say, no, this is not okay. So that's where we lie into play. Now, here's the other part to this, and the expansive part of this is those 4 pillars, we kind of grew from something that we call, or that we took from the United States called the comprehensive gang model strategy. And what this comprehensive gang model strategy is this. And does everybody know what this is? It's a Rubik's Cube, right? So So I'll tell you the Rubik's Cube, the purpose of this cube, it's a game for kids and adults and for everybody else. It's a little cube, right? There's 6 sides to it. There's different colors on it. It's usually all mixed up. That's a perfectly made Rubik's Cube. That's the goal. The goal is to put that Rubik's Cube together. All right, but what this model says that we took from the United States, which is the gold standard, is it says, hey, listen, the police traditionally, we've looked at this Rubik's Cube, which is the gang problem. I want you to imagine Rubik's Cube is the actual gang problem. When we look at it, all we care about is the blue side. So we just put this puzzle together, but once the blue side becomes all blue, we got this problem solved. We figured it out. But what happens is, as we figure this out, on the other side might be community housing. And community housing side, while our side makes sense, the other side might be all messed up. Now they got to work with that. And as they make their side orange, our side gets messed up. And then underneath that are hospitals who have to treat gang members and gang victims. And their side might be messed up. And then you have jails, and then you have probation, you have corrections, you have schools. There's all these different impacted stakeholders or groups or organizations that deal with gangs at some level that we're not communicating with each other. We're just trying to put our side of the puzzle together, but we don't realize we might be screwing each other up in the process of it. So this massive model says you need to get everybody together, find these risk factors, and determine who's the best for this, but we all need to be working in the same language. We need to understand what exactly does a gang mean to us. And here's the part of why there's no actual legal definition of a gang anywhere in the world. For us as law enforcement, when we have gangs, all right, there's 3 purposes of a gang by our legal definition, all right, and by all the academic record. This is what gangs do. They control a territory, they collect debt, and they deal drugs. Everything else that they do is an offshoot off of that. It has to do either with controlling an area, collecting money, or dealing drugs. Is that the same for a school? No, their impacts of gangs in a school is very different. Disruptive behavior in the classroom, maybe some low-level crime. It's very different, but it's not the way we look at it. And hospitals don't look at it that way. They're looking at treating gang members who've been the victim of shootings as different cases. Well, now you have to have heightened security measures because we don't know what retaliation gangs is. The point of this was we need to get everybody on the same page to say, what are your impacts? What are your needs? How do we address this together, and who's the best for what? And what the model says is these are the people who you start with. Schools, local service agencies, police, all the criminal justice entities being courts, probation officers, parole officers, municipal government, provincial, and federal government. Right, so you're going to go horizontally, which is like all the city stuff, including the police, and then you go horizontal or vertically, being ministries of corrections, which is jails. You got Ministry of Probation and Parole, as well as the federal government, being Public Safety Canada, to all get into this. So that's what we've been working on for the last 2 years plus 3 years, is figuring out a way to get all of us together. But we've had some obstacles doing it. Before we get to the open session, where we have a conversation, what I'd ask everybody to do is. That if you're on Twitter or Instagram, that's my handle. You can follow me on there. But what we ask everybody, again, going into the open session, I'll tell you some of the insights we've gained. And actually, last night we had one in the Jane and Finch community, and there was probably about 20 participants. It wasn't a heavy group. And I'll tell you what we've kind of noticed is in situations like this where there's not a massive turnout, generally speaking, in our experience now, the gang impacts are heavy. Okay, the ones where there's not a lot of people that come out, and this is okay. This is perfect for us. The gang impacts are heavy. People are afraid to come out. People don't want anything to do once they see a police logo and they hear the word gang. They want nothing to do with this. So thank you all for coming out for this stuff. But in those we get the best insights, and I'll tell you some of the insights that we get. All right, and some of those insights are small things I could tell you for us, and this is where what you tell us here, we guarantee you on a level of anonymity, saying that we're going to protect you in this process. But we also get what you say out to the public. We have a blog that I'm a little behind, but we take everything we say, we kind of guise everybody's opinion or where it came from. I'll never say it came from you and this is what you said. I just say this is kind of what we heard, but we kind of vet it or put it in a way where it's real anonymous, but it really gets the point across because we need people to know what's actually happening in neighborhoods. And I'll tell you, for us as law enforcement, where we learn a lot of things is how we operate is in one of the neighborhoods that we were in, one of the questions we asked was, how do we better engage your neighborhood? And this neighborhood, they had about 60 people show up. So it was a very engaged neighborhood, but they were also very gang impacted. And one of the mothers there, when it came down to police and trust issues, and our town halls are not just about what is the relationship with the police and the community. That's a small part of it. All right, the bigger part is what's happening every day for you. But anyways, this mother ends up saying, when it comes down to trust issues, in that community there was a 15-year-old kid that was shot and killed a year earlier. All right, and the newspaper, we dubbed it as a gang-related death. All right, to us it was a gang-related death, but here's what we didn't realize until we actually spoke to the community. That community didn't know that kid as a gang member. They knew him as a 2-year-old kid that was growing up in that area. So they felt like we devalued the death because we put the term gang onto it. Right, and what happens to those people? I want you to think outside of the city, and if you're not gang impacted, if you see a murder on the newspaper or on city TV and you see gang related, what do some people do that don't live in those areas? Take a sigh of relief. Oh, it's just gangs. It's gangs killing gangs. But to that community, that's a kid that they grew up with. That's somebody of value to them. And where the distrust comes from is when we go and we knock on those doors and we're looking for witnesses to a murder and nobody wants to come forward, we victimize ourselves. So we can't even do our job as police officers. Nobody's even telling us we want to catch this murder, and we leave. But what this community member painted a picture for us was, imagine you're the mom of that deceased kid, and you grow up in that neighborhood, and you know your neighbor knows who killed your kid. The guy who works at the store knows who killed your kid. The kid who's playing in the park knows who killed your kid, but nobody's even said anything to you. So the distrust starts right from the get-go. And the benefit of that story for us was, traditionally speaking, when we speak to other police officers and we relay these type of messages and these stories back to them, it does a few things for us. One, if you were to have a relationship, let's say, for example, sorry, your name is again? Sandra, and your name was? Siobhan? So let's say, Sandra, I were to tell you today, Sandra, I want you to make a relationship with Siobhan, but know that the only thing she hates in life is Sandra. And you go there, how much effort would you put into making a relationship with her? None. You'd probably try and say, hey, how are you? And she'd say, get lost. And you say, I tried and I left, because you've already mentally thought that 100% of her hate is towards me. Well, for us, once we realized through that story we're only about 10% of that distrust. Now, Sandra, if I were to tell you now, I want you to go make a relationship with Siobhan, but just know, hey, 10% of her kind of doesn't like you. So if you can outlast that 10% and maybe change that mind, would you approach that relationship a little different?
No.
No, you wouldn't. For us police officers, it changes a lot of things. Massive things. It lets us now understand that take your time. We just got to win 10%. We're not 100% of it. We gained many insights. We gained some good ones last night that we're going to take going forward. So what I'll ask now is we'll take a 5-minute break. You guys can stay where you are, grab some more food, grab some more water bottles. If there's coffee left, grab it. We'll come back here in 5 minutes. I'm going to turn off the camera, turn off the mic, and then we'll just get to the opinion pieces and whatever you guys think. So thank you so much, guys, for coming out again today. We'll take 5 minutes and we'll come back.